Activate Your Introvert, the weekly show to help leaders build performance by understanding introversion. In this week's show, introversial news, dating apps, Morris dancers, labels, and the World Gravy Wrestling Championships. A discussion with Hadi Haboubi. Hadi is a peak performance mindset strategist who helps leaders step into their most focused states in less time. Question of the week: why do people find small talk so hard? Just before speaking to Hadi, what's introversial in the news recently? Dating, or more specifically, dating apps, been around quite a few years now, but they've appeared a couple of times in the news lately, with titles like "Dating apps have made our love lives hell. Why do we keep using them?" Essentially saying how bad online behaviour has been normalised and that it stops us from normal social intercourse. Having used some dating apps for a few years, not lately, I've not seen some of the behaviours mentioned in the articles, but I did realise that being online with lots of people to choose from, it seemed to me sometimes that the search moves from who do I want to how to rule out people quickly, which is something I've heard from other people too. Change in socialisation is interesting though. Are our social skills diminishing or just changing and adapting to the digital world? Some people have said that suits introverts. I disagree. Many introverts I've spoken to report the same kind of social exhaustion after interacting online that they report when face to face. Certainly the relentless pressure to answer WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger, seemingly 24/7, doesn't help. And the constant notifications, the little bings, I'd love to know your views on that, but yes, I turn all my notifications off for a much more peaceful life. Morris men and ladies are not something I normally talk about on the show, but this week I spent 4 days helping to run a folk festival. As a result, I had many conversations about introversion, as one does. There's often an assumption around that performers are extroverted. After all, isn't all that up on stage stuff just extrovert behaviour? What could be more performance-based than dancing around the streets, wearing bells and strange costumes? So I took the opportunity to find out. Are Morris dancers extroverts? And the answer is no. Didn't surprise me in any way, I hasten to add. In fact, I think there's a slight increase in introversion among the population I asked. Also, as has been discussed on the show before, many comedians, actors and speakers are introverts. Introversion does not mean you can't perform well. Some speakers have said to me it's like putting on a cloak, and that being on stage is an introvert-friendly place where you do your thing, communicate well, and other people find it useful and enjoyable, which of course plays to introvert strengths. And that analogy would certainly work with Morris dancers. They certainly put on some very colourful cloaks. One other interesting thing here though came from some research I did among introverts who survive, in inverted commas, conferences, large networking events. The tip is to get a role, get a job, do something, because by doing something official, it seems many people find it less socially draining to interact. It certainly helps one to get into, and probably more importantly, out of conversations. Doing a survey, offering help, selling tickets, or simply wearing funny hats, bells and sticks. The serious leadership point here though is that giving your introverts roles when you're running a conference or some other large event is something they will probably find beneficial. And finally, if you were thinking Morris dancing was taking things a little far on the show, possibly the most balmy news item of the week is that the World Gravy Wrestling Championships return to Lancashire. Competitors grapple in 2-minute bouts with points scored for fancy dress, entertainment and wrestling ability. Yes, the wrestling is done in gravy. It just goes to show there's always something wonderfully crazy going on. And I'm sure that some of those wrestlers were introverted. But perhaps now we should speak to the definitely not crazy Hadi Haboubi. Welcome, Hadi.
Hi, John. Good to be here.
In a few minutes, you're going to share some tips and ideas, and we'll chat about states and how that affects introversion and extroversion. But before we get into that, are you an introvert or an extrovert? And what difference has that made to you?
I see myself as more introverted than extroverted. For me, that means it requires more energy for me to be around more people than if I was just by myself. So I know that there might be a bit more additional friction than, for example, maybe other people, and I might need to recharge more afterwards to kind of go back to my normal place.
That's certainly common for many people. What difference has that made to you in running your business?
For my business, it's a lot about going out there and building relationships and showing up sometimes to big groups to connect and kind of deliver. That requires me having to not allow this to limit my ability to show up and put myself into a box, but to understand or create the space or how to structure my day in a way that allows me to recharge in the right ways and perform at my best.
I love that answer because it's not about they can't go up on stage, they can't mingle with lots of people. But what you're talking about is structuring your day so you can get your energy back after you've done that. Love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Tell us about mindset strategy and issues around different states.
Yes. So a lot of the work that I do when I work with, entrepreneurs or leaders really is about embracing uncertainty. A lot of the times, as leaders or entrepreneurs, we're showing up and we don't know what the outcome is, and it requires a bit of kind of vulnerability and kind of embracing that uncertainty. And the way we do that is to build certainty in ourselves, right? A lot of the times we struggle with uncertainty because of this thing we have called the mind, and the mind does not like uncertainty. It likes things it's familiar. If you think about what the purpose of the mind is, it's kind of a storage unit, and the purpose of it is survival, right? It's trying to identify, is this a threat? Is this not a threat? And so it's always kind of making that analysis inside the mind. And when there's things that are uncertain around us, it goes into this mode of, hey, what's going on over here? And might push a narrative there to move us away from that uncertainty to something that we're more certain of, even though that might come at the cost of our growth or of our long term joy, but it's more focused on that short term survival unless we condition and train it to accept those things. And, one challenge that sometimes as an introvert, we're a lot of the times in our own mind. And so we're kind of analyzing or kind of thinking about things in our own mind for a very long period of time. And what the mind does is it magnifies a lot of things. So when we spend too much in the mind, it looks at the problem and as much bigger than it should be, and we start attaching ourselves a bit to the problem. And we need to neutralize how we're kind of what is the charge that we're giving to the problem, and to kind of neutralize the problem itself.
Funny, while you were talking about the uncertainty thing, I was reflecting on sometimes I'll jump into uncertainty 40 meters under the surface of the English Channel, and I don't know what I'm going to find. How do I deal with that? By preparation, by making sure all the things that I can control, I'm certain about, because then it allows me to deal with more uncertainty in other ways. And I guess that's kind of what you're talking about, but in a slightly different setting.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a couple of things. One is to have the right structure and preparation that reduces the uncertainty for the brain and allows it, allow you to focus on what you need to focus on without the brain kind of draining the energy of what's happening over here. But the other is a lot of the time, as I was mentioning, the brain magnifies what is a problem. And we have essentially a lot of these events that we attach too much sometimes fear to them because we're magnifying what the problem is. But with any challenge or whatever fear we have, there is drawbacks or opportunities or benefits from that fear happening. So, for example, I've had this fear of showing up and making speeches or doing presentations because of an event that happened when I was a child, where I went to the stage and I went blank and I just couldn't say anything. Right, the worst case scenario happened, And I had,
Horrible, horrible when that
yeah.
happens.
And that event in my mind had a negative charge, i.e., my mind evaluated and interpreted that event in a negative way. And so, whenever there was an opportunity where there was a spotlight on me, or there was a podium, or I had to speak up, the mind was like, hey, don't do that. That's dangerous. So, it throws in fear, panic attack, anxiety, whatever it can to move me away from that situation. But we can always go back in time and analyze that event and say, hey, what are the actual benefits that happened because of that event? Because of that event, I was able to, for example, go deeper into how to improve my communication, go deeper in terms of how should I present myself. And now I understand how people, when they have challenging events in the past, how to help them overcome that. The reason why I know that is because of that event. So there's a lot of benefits that happen from past events or from the fears that we think, oh, if this happens, this is the worst case scenario. But actually, if it happens, there's going to be a lot of benefits from that. And if the opposite happens, there's going to be a lot of drawbacks from that. And in this way, we're kind of neutralizing the charge on that event. And when we do that, we're able to access better states. And instead of the mind coming in the way and throwing in narratives of panic attack and anxiety, we're able to move the mind a bit to the side and for us to fully show up without that internal resistance, without that internal critic that diverts our focus.
So, a couple of things I picked from that. One was too much overthinking, which especially an introvert thing
Yeah.
can mean that you attach to the problem too much. And the other one, and I'm sure we all have examples, that item from your history, the stage thing, a generalization from our history can limit us unless we change the narrative, I guess is what you're saying there.
Yeah, exactly. And in this way, you're kind of telling the mind, hey, good thing, bad thing, like who knows? And you're neutralizing the magnitude of those things. And when you neutralize that, what you're able to do afterwards is then to ask yourself, okay, what are the 5 things I need to do right now so that I don't make that fear, manifest? But you're only able to think creatively and focused way when you neutralize the charge that the mind is kind of throwing at you. So that's one way. And the other way is, which I help a lot of my clients do, is to go back in time and reinterpret those events. Because what we've done is we have had so many events where we've interpreted them from that limited capacity at that young age to interpret those events. And we've made conclusions about who we are and what we're capable of, about the qualities that we possess. And all those qualities kind of created this generalization about who we are. And we can go back in time and reinterpret those events. And essentially, what you have is this amazing time machine, really, that we all have, but we're not using because we don't want to go to the past because of that friction there is sometimes there. But it's a powerful thing to reinterpret events, to allow you to really see yourself in a different way and to validate qualities that you don't think you may have, but you actually have.
Quick question for you, because you mentioned states a couple of times. Lots of listeners might not quite know what you mean by that. And then one other really quick question to go with it, because we're running short time now, is do introverts access their states differently, or is it exactly the same?
So what is a state? What I mean by a state is the kind of emotional and thought state that you're in any given moment. We basically act based on how we feel and the states that we're in. So for example, when I'm going up and doing a presentation, I can know everything that I need to know about what I need to present. I can have the skills, but am I showing up with more excitement, focus, joy? That's the kind of states, or with more fear or doubt. That could be a different state. And that changes the execution of what I'm trying to do, or the performance and the delivery of all that. So the states that you have, and we can access different states. And I consider confidence as a state that we can access, because sometimes, something happens, or, we've all been in that situation where we play that record in our head that it's not going to go well. It's not going to go well.
So it's like a mental condition or a mental overcoat that we can wear almost. And
Yeah.
we can choose different ones. We could put a confidence coat on as well as a fearless coat or something else. We might get too hot if we do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Introverts, I presume it works exactly the same because it's just a mental thing for introverts and extroverts. There's no difference there.
I wouldn't see a difference there. We all have those states that we can access, and we can all kind of generate the feelings in the moments to help us execute it from a better place instead of waiting for what emotions to land on us and to act from those places. We can be the architects of the feelings and generate those to perform at a bigger level, a higher level.
Two quick questions for you now then. Number one, could you give us a tip for an introvert to get into the right state?
One tip I would give is that think about whatever state that you're trying to create: confidence, focus, fun, whatever state, whatever feeling or attitude you want to create. Think about a memory whereby you had that state very intense, with intensity, and go back to that memory and see it as if it's happening right now, seeing it from your eyes and hearing what you'd be hearing in that specific memory, and feel the feelings that come up from that memory. Because how we record memories is through our senses. And when you bring back a memory, you bring back the feeling with it that you brought. So, you have a memory that you were very confident, you can bring that back as if it's happening right now in your mind. And with that, you bring the confident state and feeling, and you can act from that place.
Brilliant. And if I was a leader or manager, probably extroverted, how could I help my introverted staff to change their state?
I think one thing that I would recommend is to, again, not label someone as, hey, this is who they are, and they are limited in what they can do. And for a manager or a leader to create the space for them to help their staff to show up in the way that they can show up, by having conversations also about how does that process look like. Because sometimes introverts might not be as proactive in kind of doing things like speeches or things like that, but it doesn't mean they don't have the skills, and it doesn't mean they can't build that. So it's kind of creating the step plan and having conversations about how can we put that in place for their introverted staff to show up in the way that exemplifies the qualities that they already have.
Brilliant. Okay, no, thank you, Hadi. That's been really interesting. We're completely out of time, I'm afraid. Perhaps you could just very quickly let people know how they can get back in touch with you.
Go to my website, mindremastered.com, and where they can have access to me. And I'm also going to provide a PDF about how to embrace uncertainty if people are interested in that, which I think we'll add in the links.
No, that would be brilliant. So we'll add a link so that people can download that PDF, which sounds great. Hadi, it's been superb talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, John. Have a great day.
This week's question is similar to one I often get asked. So thank you, Dave. It was also in The Guardian a couple of weeks ago. I did a double take when I saw it on the front page. Why do people find small talk so hard? Firstly, it is mainly, but not exclusively, introverts who don't like small talk. In my survey on the subject, nearly a third of extroverts don't like it either. Reasons? Well, actually, there's lots, but don't know what to say. It's irrelevant. It's normally nonsensical drivel or somebody else's ego overflowing. Don't know how to get into the conversation. Don't know how to get out of the conversation. And finally, a much bigger one than most people think, feel trapped in the conversation. As I said, small talk featured in The Guardian recently, with research showing how useful 4 minutes of small talk can be. It can help us better judge the personality of people, whether they're upbeat, downbeat, cooperative or not. Useful things to learn in the people that we work with, whether that's long or short term, sell to or need to influence. And I often say, small talk is like a social lubricant. The lubricant allows people to interact more easily on the bigger and more important items that they need to converse on. So there's several good reasons for being able to join in for a short period, dealing with the what's the point type of answers when people don't like small talk. Interestingly, the article picked on something I've often found people telling me. People find small talk hard because it feels like it's never going to end. Once you have all the information you need, it can feel awkward and pointless, according to the article. In other words, it may be excruciating to start a conversation, unpleasant to keep it going for 4 minutes, but many people fear as they're worried about how to get out of the conversation. Tips to escape a conversation depend, of course, on the situation. At a networking type of event, asking the other people who they want to meet and introducing them can leave you free, or simply drawing somebody else into the conversation so you can leave it. A good use of a summary shows that you are listening well, which is an important point. And then it allows you to move on. And of course, your phone vibrating in your pocket can be the emergency parachute. Another tip, don't worry about being interesting. Be interested. That's a great maxim. Ask questions and listen. What can you learn? Adapt a curious attitude. And what needs clarifying? One great networker has a simple rule. Once you've asked 3 questions and they've shown no interest in you, it's time to move on. At least you don't get trapped in a never-ending waterfall of ego. A big thanks to Will Kintish for that one. If you go to the sleeve notes, you can download my guide to small talk with many more ideas in it. What question would you like answered on the show? Whether you want to be on the show or just have your question answered, go to activateyourinTrovert.co.uk, where there's a box for you to ask your question. You could also follow on Facebook and discuss your answers at the show's page. Activate your introvert.
I'm John Baker. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful. There's a new episode every Thursday at activateyourinTrovert.co.uk and your favourite podcast provider. Till then, go be introversial, activating your introverts, building your business.